No nonsense. Hi, and welcome to another episode of No Nonsense Psychiatry. And this will be our fourth show, actually. And like in all other shows, I've gone over the first couple, or first the one before, just to give you an idea of what's actually going on. I think it's important for people that are just joining us today to perhaps even start at that point rather than listening to this show at the moment, and just to get yourself familiar with things so that you don't sort of feel like you've missed out on anything or something doesn't quite might not make sense. So it's good to go back and you might actually find the answers there. There is no shortcut to this. At the end of the day. So the first show was really an introduction into the why and how, giving you a bit of a brief view of the motivation behind making this type of show and how I think it's going to be different. And then in the second show, I looked at the potentials of what can occur if you were to try and treat yourself or try and treat yourself with some support. And then in the last show, I talked about traditional psychiatry and I looked at the fors and against of it, which I think is important to understand. And I think this, you need a good foundation for anything initially. And I think, as time goes on, it's going to be more of an interactive type show. But I think at the moment, we just need to be laying the foundation, if you like, so that there's no confusion when it actually comes to what the show is going to be about and the expectation of what you think is going to occur if you were to continue with the show. And I realised making episode 4 that I don't think I've actually introduced myself. I know I told you a little bit about what I've been doing for a number of years, but I never actually said my name, and my name is Mark. So if that's a surprise to you, I apologise. If it's not, then you might have read the link before or whatever. So I'm very pleased that you're still with us, or if you've just joined us, that's who I am. So I think in today's show, what I decided that I was going to talk about is what counts as a severe mental health condition. I think this is really, really important to understand, and it's really important for people to get the grasp of things. Because as I said in the last show, I think psychiatry or mental health systems from my experience, seem very well set up to address severe mental health conditions. And I think everybody has anybody that works in mental health or has had a lot of exposure to it would probably agree that when it comes to dealing with people that have severe and enduring mental illness. They can be quite well looked after. The problems that I guess they face, the reason why things do go wrong, I think for some of that reason is that a lot of people will mention that the mental health system is broken, and while I understand that, and on the surface it looks like that because things do get missed or there are gaps that appear that people fall through, if you like, the gaps. However, I think because the focus is so much on mental health and not psychiatry, I think the system isn't built for that. And I don't know how long it's going to take for the system to be built for that, because not everybody that you see is in a crisis of a mental health condition that requires a hospital admission, for instance. And there are other people that clearly need a hospital admission. But let me just try and get you to get your head around what counts as a severe mental health condition, okay? And this is what the system, I think, is set up for. So I'll say the word again, severe mental health condition. And the first one I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you some examples of what severe mental health conditions are. And top of the shop, no surprise, is schizophrenia. And it affects how you think, feel, and behave to the point where you lose touch with reality. Okay, I know that some people might feel that they do that sometimes, but in schizophrenia that really is quite severe, and it's not something that, yes, stress can bring it on. They don't actually really know what brings it on, but in my experience, stress can bring it on. Non-compliance with medication can bring it on. Sometimes using illicit substances can exacerbate the symptoms. And that's what happens. And sometimes people with schizophrenia will just naturally relapse. It doesn't matter how much medication they take, they will relapse. And that is a severe mental health condition. Okay? That's not somebody that's used ice or MDA or mushrooms at the weekend. They don't suddenly develop schizophrenia. That's not to say they're not experiencing psychosis, but it's not schizophrenia. Okay? Bipolar disorder. So this causes extreme mood swings. Yeah, you get lots of highs, mania or hypermania, and lows of depression. Okay, that's not your mood going up and down systematically and then okay. This is something that's going to progressively relapse and get worse and worse and worse to the point where someone, for instance, right, I'm not saying that everybody does this, but for instance, someone with bipolar and they're having a particular high, they may go out and take out loads of loans or feel that they're superstars or live that kind of lifestyle of a superstar, sell their house, become quite disinhibited, do things that they wouldn't normally do in their highs. And when they get really low, they might be really suicidal. And, and some people will, for instance, that have got bipolar, that take medications. Some people experience lows and all they want to do, they might stop taking medications because they just want to feel high again. And that's not something they can help. This is something that's biologically happening to them. Medication is probably what keeps them on a level. This isn't something that a good talk's going to sort out. Does that make sense? And we have major depressive disorders, persistent sadness and loss of interest that can seriously impact your life. Somebody that doesn't wash, somebody that doesn't get out of bed, somebody that's been like this for a long, long time. Yeah. OCD, I'm not talking about someone that can't go out of the house without making sure their house is locked up 5 times. I mean, this is people that are washing their hands continuously or consistently thinking about things, having intrusive thoughts and compulsive actions that interfere with their daily life. They could be driving to work and they might have to drive 10 miles out of their way, but they have to. They feel compelled to go that distance. This isn't somebody that's always checking the window or something like that, and then stops doing that. PTSD, a word that gets used so much, stressful or frightening memories from very traumatic events that affect your everyday life. This is stuff that's where people are having real flashbacks of traumatic events, whatever that might be to them. Trauma is whatever you think it is at the end of the day, and have a strong diagnosis of this, not just something that's happened to them once or twice. This has been proven and treated. Yeah. Post-traumatic stress disorder, borderline personality disorders, challenging emotions in relationships and self-images. These are all consistent things. A borderline personality disorder at one time, in from my experience, wasn't taken very seriously. But people don't do this for no reason. People behave in a certain way because that's how things are set up from at the moment. Borderline personality disorder, normal people don't do what people with borderline personality disorders do. And normally that fits a specific criteria as well. There's got to be a lot of history that's linked because it's the most talked about, I guess, diagnosis at the moment. And also, but it has to fit a criteria. It would have come along with a lot of traits. A lot of things would have happened to that person for them to arrive at that diagnosis. And not everybody, warrants getting it, and not that they deserve to not get it or to get it, but it's a really harsh thing to put on somebody that may be just antisocial. It's a harsh diagnosis to put something on. Severe anxiety disorders like panic disorders, social anxieties, which really disrupt your life. People can't go out, they can't walk on lines, they can't go out on certain times of day. You know, they've got chronic anxiety that sits with them all the time. Eating disorders, serious disturbance in eating behaviours like anorexia or bulimia. You know, people that are so mentally challenged that they feel that they feel compelled not to eat, or they see things that other people don't see, in the sense of how they appear, or they just have a compulsion to be like that. Autism, autistic or spectrum disorder. Yeah, autism spectrum disorder. And these are people that have communication problems, behaviour problems, and it's usually noticed in childhood. It's something that goes a long time. And of course, now we have attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, ADHD, ongoing problems with attention, activity, and impulse control. So these are often quite comprehensive treatments that are put in place to treat these things. Whether you've had a good experience in the past with it or a bad experience in the past trying to get this stuff treated, both sides of the coin are exactly correct. You know, it is a bit of a mess with some of these things, but it really takes a lot to be able to have a diagnosis of this. This isn't something that just gets put on anybody. And on the other side of the scale, yeah, not every mental health issue is severe, yeah, and this is the part of the show that I think this addresses this area here. Okay, we're not talking about severe mental health conditions, and when we talk about this show, we're talking about conditions that we don't need to involve ourselves normally in the psychiatric system. Okay. You know, you can still get help and everything without being labelled as having a mental illness. And that's not to say that people that are labelled with a mental illness are bad in any sort of way. It's just that they have a severe mental health condition. And to identify that person correctly within the mental health system to ensure they get the right treatment, they're the sort of diagnoses that are going to get consistent treatment and pretty regimented treatment because they are severe. Other issues are everyday life things, mild anxiety and depression, but they don't stop you from living your life, okay? They don't stop you from getting up in the morning, you know, but you still have real anxiety, you still have low mood. Yeah, they just don't stop you from carrying on with life. A bit like a functional alcoholic, you know. They drink every day, but they can still get up in the morning and go to work. Adjustment disorders, short-term emotional or behavioural responses to specific stressors, okay? When we've got change in our life and it's not good, that change might be a divorce, that change may be changing school, that might be moving house, that might be getting married, that might be having children, that might be doing a new job, that might be being financially independent, that might be loss of home, that might be having to move state, move country, loss of parents. These are all things. It's all short-term emotional appropriate responses, behavioural responses to specific stressors. Okay, adjustment disorders, situational stress, like when you feel like from work or from relationship issues. Yeah, situational stress. It's all real, you know. And, you know, not everybody likes doing what they do at work. Not everybody's fortunate to have a job that they really like. Yeah. And or not everybody's in a relationship that's perfect, you know. And you look at social media nowadays, you know, social media, I mean, like everybody's family album normally has people smiling and laughing in it anyway when they used to take photos on bits of paper. But nowadays, it's instant, isn't it? You know, it's that instant gratification. There's me on holiday with my partner. They got the typical selfie, heads together, smiling, got the shades on, some beautiful background. Yeah. And then, you know, that could all change. It could be a poor relationship. So it's going to cause problems, and it's situational stress. Phobias. Yeah. People that have phobias, but they don't really disrupt everyday activities. You know, they do have phobias against what's happening and around them, or spiders, or going out, or being in crowds, or those types of things. They're phobias that people can have, and it can disrupt your everyday activities. Mild insomnia, seasonal affective disorder. When I lived in England, I really believed seasonal affective disorders exist. When you wake up in the dark and you go home in the dark from work, it's like, wow, it's grey skies. It's not very nice. And some people get that in the winter style months. And we might find, I don't know, we'll have to look into research it, but you might find that there's people in southern parts of Australia that might be affected by SAD more than people that have like sunshine and stuff all the time. So you've got those types of disorders, and they usually can be managed with self-care. Mild obsessive compulsive behaviours, or mild ADHD, we can all be pretty obsessed about things, like clean surfaces, or people putting stuff away, or people putting things back where they're meant to go, or making sure windows are closed, or doors are closed when you go out at a time because you're worried there's going to be a fire or something like that. These are all mild obsessive compulsive behaviours, or mild ADHD. Or temporary emotional reactions like grief and disappointment that don't last too long. I mean, some people's, how long does grief last? There's how long's a bit of string? You don't know. But these are things. If somebody has just lost their parent, and they're sad about it, and even if they're sort of talking about, I just don't want to live anymore and stuff like that, I wouldn't be surprised by what they're saying. They're in grief. It's emotional stress. Someone's going to get promoted for a job, and then they get cut out of it, and the best mate gets it. Yeah, or being with a girl and you're going to get married, and all of a sudden she doesn't want to be married to you anymore. These are all temporary reactions, okay, and things that could be helped with self-care and support, and maybe some short-term therapy. Yeah, these are the sort of things that are severe, and these are the things that are not so severe. So the mental health system is set up for the severe and mental health conditions. And when you look at how many people, say for instance, have schizophrenia, which is probably about 1% of the population, you might have 30-40% of people that have got a diagnosis of depression, clinical depression. Of course, you're going to see more of the people that have depression or temporary reactions to grief and disappointment, relationship problems. You're going to see more of those people in the hospital. But the system's set up for these severe mental health conditions. And rightly so, there should be a service for these. This other stuff that's there now is stuff that's always been there, but it's become more focused. And society needs to look at the reasons why that happens. For instance, I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that people watch and listen to streaming services, Facebooking services, Instagram, Snapchat, all instant gratification. Yeah. And when things don't quite happen the way that they expect them to happen, and I'm talking about expectation, or when things don't happen, they naturally react bad to that. And I would too. If that's all I knew, I would too. And some people have learned to rely on services and rely on other people to sort problems out for them. And that isn't healthy for them. So again, there's that dissatisfaction. And that's where I'm going to leave it today. I'm going to leave that today. There's a lot there to digest today. And I hope that you understand why the mental health system can sometimes appear broken. Because of these things. It's not that anybody doesn't want to help you. It's sometimes they don't have the capacity to. And what is super important to people when they're really stressed is to get support. And sometimes the mental health system hasn't got that support there. It doesn't have somebody that can sit with you for hours. It can't just give you a hospital admission. It can't take the pain away for you there and then. There isn't even medication that can knock you out within 5 seconds. There's not that service there. And then depending on where you live, depends on how much of a service there is. So that service might be very, very scarce. It might be in a poor part of the country or a not so prevalent part of the country. And in big cities, you're going to have the services there, but then they're going to be overwhelmed by the amount of people that are feeling that, because obviously they're getting more foot flow through their place. So yes, it is broken. Yes, it isn't perfect. But I'm hoping that with this show, perhaps for some of you, we can just avoid some of the rat race and the emotional disappointment that you can sometimes feel with the mental health system, and feel supported in other ways. Anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about for today. And the next time we get together, I'm going to talk about potential disadvantages of having a mental health background. And I think it's really important for people to understand that as well. So remember to like the show. Please, please, please like the show. Share it if you can. There's people out there that might want to listen to it. It's free. It's not gonna cost them anything. And subscribe. That'd be great. Thank you so much for being with me again, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye now.
No nonsense.